The vibration on the kitchen counter was the only sound in the dead quiet of my tiny studio, but the text message that lit up my screen hit me with the force of a physical blow. "It's compromised, Mia. They're on the move. Get out now." My heart seized, a cold knot tightening in my chest. No. I stumbled back, knocking over a tower of instant ramen cups. The air in the usually cozy space, filled with the scent of cheap detergent and old coffee, suddenly felt thin, impossible to breathe. I swept my panicked gaze over the cramped room, the thrift store couch, the miniature fridge, the window overlooking a brick wall. It was my refuge, my invisible life, and now it was a target. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. How? Who? It had been 6 months of quiet, tedious, soul-crushing normality since I moved to Seattle. 6 months of grinding shifts at the high-end coffee shop and nights spent stressing over tuition, and I'd almost let myself believe the past was truly over. The screen lit up again. This one was shorter, sharper, more terrifying. The old shipping yard, Pier 4, midnight. Don't trust the usual contacts. It was from Liam. Liam, the only person besides my friend Sarah who knew everything, the person who had set up my escape. A wave of dizziness washed over me. Pier 4. That was a terrifying stretch of abandoned coast, miles away, and my watch blinked 11:05 p.m. I snatched my worn backpack, adrenaline flooding my system. What could I possibly need? My emergency cash, scraped together over months, was in a shoebox. My fake ID was in my wallet. I was nothing more than a ghost, a tiny, forgettable shadow in this enormous city. How could they possibly have tracked me? A thunderous, non-negotiable pounding on the door shattered the silence. Not a knock, a demand. My blood turned to ice. They were already here. I froze, every muscle locking up, barely daring to inhale. The pounding came again, louder, punctuated by a deep, guttural voice that echoed in the hallway. "Sarah, we know you're in there. Open the door." That wasn't right. My name was Mia. Sarah was the reason I was here. A sharp, burning wave of guilt, a constant companion for the last 6 months, washed over me. I had promised her one simple, ridiculous favor, one last blind date. Now, her name was being shouted by men who sounded like they wanted to tear the door off its hinges. Heavy footsteps sounded outside, deliberate and menacing. They weren't asking, they were taking. Panic clawed at my throat, threatening to choke me. "Think, Mia, think." My eyes darted to the window. It led out onto a narrow fire escape, a rickety ladder disappearing into the dark drizzle of the alley below. It was 3 stories down, but it was my only chance. With hands that shook uncontrollably, I wrestled with the old latch, finally managing to slide the window open with a grinding screech. A blast of cold, wet air hit my face, carrying the distant smell of the sea. I threw one leg over the sill, my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Suddenly, the cheap wood of the door gave way with a sickening, violent crash. 2 huge figures, all bulk and menace, filled the doorway. Their faces were grim, their eyes glinting with a predatory focus that sent a deep, animalistic shiver down my spine. "There she is," one of them growled, lunging across the room toward me. With a desperate, terrified surge of strength, I pushed off the sill, my body dropping into the night air. The rusty metal of the fire escape bit into my hands as I grabbed hold, my muscles screaming in protest. I scrambled down, heedless of the drop, the concrete alley floor rushing up to meet me. The alley reeked of stale beer and rotting food, but it was freedom. I landed awkwardly with a jarring thud. A searing pain shot up my right knee, but I suppressed a cry and forced myself to run. The sound of my pursuers smashing out the window above spurred me on. I stumbled through the narrow passage, my lungs burning, the fear a cold, paralyzing knot in my gut. I had to get to Pier 4. I had to find Liam. He was my last hope. My lungs were screaming for oxygen, each ragged breath a sharp, clean pain in my chest. The alleyway was a suffocating labyrinth of overflowing dumpsters and water-stained brick, a confusing nightmare designed to disorient me. I stumbled again, the injured knee sending a fresh spike of blinding agony up my leg. I couldn't stop. The primal image of those two men, their eyes, the sheer hunger in them, was the only fuel I needed. They weren't just men. I didn't know what they were, but I knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones, that they were not going to stop until they had me. After what felt like an eternity of blind flight, I burst from the alley onto a wide, wet street, frantically scanning for a way to vanish. My phone, still clenched in my hand, buzzed with Liam's increasingly desperate, fragmented texts. Pier 4, I'll explain. Get here. Now. The docks, however, were still a desperate distance away. I spotted a solitary cab, its light on, pulling away from a corner store. Ignoring the throbbing pain, I sprinted toward it. The driver, an older woman with an expression of patient world-weariness, looked at me with concern as I collapsed into the back seat, gasping and shivering. "Where to, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice a low, soothing rumble. The old shipping yard, Pier 4, I managed, fighting to control my breathing. She nodded, and the car smoothly pulled away from the curb. As the city lights began to blur outside the window, the frantic, panicked terror slowly receded, replaced by a cold, hard confusion. Why were they looking for Sarah? And what did this have to do with the stupid blind date? The truth was, the blind date was my fault. It was a last-minute, ridiculous favor for my roommate and best friend, Sarah, who had the worst luck with dating apps. She had set up a blind date with a CEO she'd matched with, a man named Elias Vance, on a hyper-exclusive, anonymous app. But her last-minute meltdown had been spectacular. "Please, Mia, just go in my place. Say something so utterly unhinged he runs screaming." "You're the only one who can pull off that kind of crazy," she had pleaded, eyes wide with panic. I was an abysmal liar and an even worse actress, but Sarah had been my anchor since I arrived in Seattle. I had agreed. It was supposed to be a disaster, a 2-hour ordeal where I'd invent a ludicrous backstory about being a sovereign citizen and a professional goat wrangler, and he'd find a polite way to escape. It was supposed to be a funny anecdote we'd laugh about over stale pizza later. Instead, it had become the horrifying origin point of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I was a mess, sweaty, disheveled, my jacket torn, my hair plastered to my forehead. The shipping yard was a desolate, dangerous place, the last location I wanted to be. But Liam was the only thread of safety I had. He had sworn to protect my anonymity, and I had to trust him. The cab pulled to the curb, and I paid the driver, my eyes frantically scanning the dark, shadowy industrial streets. The air here was heavy, cold, thick with the salty tang of Puget Sound. The massive warehouses loomed, silent and dark. I limped along the cracked asphalt, my knee screaming. The city noise faded, replaced by the rhythmic slosh of the tide and the distant, mournful cry of a foghorn. My phone buzzed in my hand again. "Where are you, Mia?" My heart vaulted into my throat. The message wasn't from Liam. It was from an unknown number. I stared at the screen, a new wave of sick terror washing over me. They knew. A sharp, menacing growl, a sound that was profoundly wrong, echoed from the cavernous shadows of a warehouse doorway. A dark, massive figure detached itself from the gloom and stepped into the dim security light. It was one of them, his eyes gleaming with a strange, feral intensity. He was immediately joined by 2 others, their forms shifting, their outlines becoming thicker, less human, more defined in the moonlight. They looked like... No, it was impossible. My mind was breaking. "Sarah," the first one growled, his voice a low, gravelly earthquake. "The Alpha has been waiting. We have you now." I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for impact, for the end. But the end never came. Instead, a new voice, a deep, commanding bass that sliced through the tense silence, rang out. "That is enough." I snapped my eyes open and looked up. A tall, powerful figure stood in the shadows just 20 feet away, his presence radiating an aura of absolute, effortless authority. He was dressed in a pristine, dark suit, expensive, tailor-made, and his eyes, a shocking, vibrant, almost glowing amber, seemed to ignite the darkness. He took one deliberate step forward, and the three massive figures instantly recoiled, whimpering like frightened dogs. "You are not supposed to be here," he said, his voice a low, dangerous command. "Leave, now." They turned and scattered, melting back into the darkness of the industrial maze. The man then turned his full, searing attention to me, his amber gaze intense, assessing. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. He was the man from the blind date, Elias Vance, the CEO who was supposed to be an anonymous, boring executive, not a powerful, commanding figure who could make monsters cower with a single word. "You are not Sarah," he said, his voice softer now but no less commanding. "Who are you?" My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. I was a terrible liar, and I was now cornered by my boss, the CEO of the company where I worked as a temp, the man who had just displayed a terrifying, otherworldly power. My mind raced, but only pathetic silence came out. He watched me, his gaze almost physical, like he was looking into the deep recesses of my soul. "I asked you a question," he said, taking another step closer, "and I do not like to be lied to." His words were a threat, a promise, and an unyielding command. I could feel my body trembling. He wasn't just my boss. He was something more, and I had a terrible, gut-wrenching feeling that he knew everything. The silence following his question was a suffocating, heavy blanket, thick with unspoken, terrifying truths. His amber eyes, sharp and relentlessly intelligent, held mine with an intensity that made my entire body buzz with a nervous, electric energy. He didn't blink. He simply waited, and in that waiting, every small lie I had ever told felt as though it were neon lit for him to see. I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The lie was so thin, so pathetic, it evaporated the moment I spoke it. I was still clutching my phone, the screen dark now. My injured knee throbbed, a dull, insistent ache that was completely eclipsed by the cold terror that held me captive. He took another slow, deliberate step forward, and my breath hitched. The air around him seemed to vibrate, charged with an almost physical force, and a low, earthy scent, like rain on dry desert soil, suddenly filled my senses, overwhelming the industrial grime of the docks. "Do not insult my intelligence," he said, his voice dropping to a low, powerful growl that seemed to resonate deep in my chest. "Those hunters were looking for you. They called you Sarah, and you were running. Why?" My mind was a whirlwind, scrambling desperately for a believable human explanation. I was an awful liar, but the truth was too utterly insane to ever be believed. My boss, a man who belonged in a high-rise office and on the cover of Forbes, was a werewolf alpha, and his rivals were hunting me because of my friend. I had to create a deflection, any deflection. "Sarah is my friend," I blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. I was on a blind date with you. For her, I'm not Sarah, my name is Mia Hayes." His eyes narrowed slightly, a tiny spark of something unreadable, calculation, perhaps flickering in the amber depths. "The blind date," he mused, the words a low, dangerous rumble. He had dismissed the date earlier with a look of contemptuous boredom, but now he was revisiting it, connecting the clumsy dots I had laid out. "You were the one who was supposed to be scaring me off." The statement was not a question, but a profound observation. He was remembering the conversation he'd had with Sarah online, the one that had led to my presence at that chic downtown bar. He knew my friend's plan, and that made me feel utterly naked and exposed. "Yes," I admitted, the lie now hopelessly entwined with the partial truth. "She didn't want to come, she's shy. I was doing her a favor." A tense, suffocating silence stretched between us. He was watching me, his gaze so penetrating I felt as though he could see the wild pulse hammering in my throat. I couldn't look away, even though every single instinct screamed at me to run. The air was thick with the scent of dry desert earth and something else, something primal and overwhelmingly potent that emanated from him. It was mesmerizing, terrifying, and inexplicably, dangerously compelling. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, decisive. "Get in." He gestured with a nod of his head to a black, custom-built SUV, parked discreetly in the deepest shadows. "What?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "No, I'm not. I don't know you." A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of his lips. "You were just about to go on a blind date with me for your friend, and now you claim you don't know me." His eyes held a flicker of cold amusement. "We can stand here and wait for those hunters to come back, or you can get in the car." My options were simple and equally terrifying. Face whatever was lurking in the dark, or get into the car with my equally terrifying boss, a man who had just saved my life from something I couldn't begin to comprehend. The choice wasn't a choice at all. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice trembling as I limped toward the powerful vehicle. "Somewhere safe," he said, opening the passenger door for me with a quick, fluid motion. "I have questions, Mia Hayes, and you have answers." I slid into the plush leather seat, the car's interior a warm, quiet contrast to the gritty, unkempt streets we'd just come from. He got in, the car silent as he started the engine. The powerful purr of the motor was the only sound for a long time. I risked a glance at him. His face was illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard. He was handsome in a severe, chiseled way, his jawline sharp, his brow furrowed in concentration. The corporate suit he wore seemed ill-fitting for the kind of primal power he had just displayed. "Those hunters," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What were they?" He was silent for a moment, his large, capable hands gripping the steering wheel with an almost bone-crushing intensity. "They are not of my clan," he finally said, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. The word clan landed in the air between us like a physical object. It wasn't a term I understood, not in the way he had said it. It sounded like family, but also like something ancient and military. "They were looking for a mate," he continued, his voice low and guttural. "And they believed Sarah was the one they were searching for." A mate. The word echoed in my head. I had no idea what it meant, but the gravity with which he had said it, the tension in his shoulders, made me realize it was something sacred and extremely dangerous. I was not Sarah, but I had a terrible sinking feeling that I had just stepped into her shoes in more ways than one. The car moved effortlessly through the empty night streets, leaving the docks far behind. I was now submerged in a world I didn't understand, trapped in a lie I had created for my friend, and a powerful man was demanding the truth. He was my boss, the alpha of a hidden world, and he thought I was his intended. He didn't know I was a fraud, and I had to keep it that way. But as I looked at his profile, I knew my lie had an expiration date. He had saved my life. He knew I was lying, and he wouldn't stop until he knew the whole truth. What would he do when he found out? The weight of that question settled in the silence between us, heavy and full of unspoken, irreversible consequences. The night was just beginning, and I was about to find out exactly what it meant to be a wolf something much, much more than a blind date. The city lights blurred into a mesmerizing river of color as we sped through the night. The silence in the car was heavier than the humid air outside, and I was intensely aware of every minute detail. The low, expensive thrum of the engine, the subtle, comforting scent of desert soil and rain that clung to him, the way his hands, large and capable, gripped the steering wheel. He hadn't said another word since revealing the horrifying truth about the hunters, and I didn't dare break the silence. My mind was a whirlwind of frantic, unanswerable questions. What was a mate? Why did they think it was Sarah? And most critically, what would happen when Elias Vance realized I was an imposter? We left the gritty industrial landscape of the docks, entering a glittering, glass and steel part of the city I'd only ever seen in the society pages of magazines. The buildings grew impossibly tall, their facades gleaming. He took a final turn onto a secluded street and pulled into a private, underground parking garage beneath a towering residential skyscraper, a structure that screamed wealth and exclusivity. The car's engine died with a soft click, plunging us into a silence so profound I could hear the desperate, frantic hammering of my own heart. "My home," he said simply, his voice a low rumble in the darkness. "We can talk here." I didn't argue. My knee was throbbing, and my mind felt numb from the brutal emotional whiplash of the last few hours. I followed him into the elevator, the doors closing behind us with a quiet hiss. The ride up was excruciatingly long, each ascending floor feeling like a step further into a world I was absolutely not meant to inhabit. When the doors finally parted, I stepped out into a space that stole my breath. Floor to ceiling, windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the entire city, a glittering, impossible carpet of lights stretching out to the dark horizon. The penthouse was a study in sleek, cold, minimalist design, clean lines, muted colors, and high-end furniture that looked both impossibly comfortable and utterly untouchable. It was the complete antithesis of my cozy, cluttered studio, a testament to a life lived on an entirely different plane. Elias led me to a plush, low-slung sofa and gestured for me to sit. "You're hurt," he stated, his amber eyes immediately fixed on my knee, which I had been trying unsuccessfully to hide beneath my jacket. He knelt down without a word, his touch sending a jolt of alarm and something else, a strange, powerful warmth, through me as he gently examined the twisted limb. His fingers were warm and surprisingly delicate, a stark contrast to the terrifying power he had displayed minutes earlier. "You need ice and a bandage," he announced. I watched him, my mind unable to reconcile the two sides of his character. This was the same man who had terrified me in a dark alley, who had spoken of clans and mates. Yet here he was, tending to my injury with a kindness that felt utterly disarming. The scent of desert earth was stronger now, a clean, woody, slightly metallic aroma that was strangely grounding. "Don't worry," I said, trying to pull my foot away. "I'm fine, it's just a sprain." He ignored me, rising to his feet and disappearing into what I assumed was his kitchen. He returned a moment later with a bag of ice wrapped in a thick towel and a large, professional-looking first aid kit. He sat on the floor in front of me, his knees almost touching mine. It was an intimate position that made my cheeks flush with a heat that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He carefully elevated my leg, propped it on a cushion, and wrapped the ice pack around my injured knee. "I asked you a question, Mia," he said, his voice quiet, serious. "And I'll ask it again. Why did you lie to me?" The directness of his question sliced through the awkward tension. I couldn't run anymore. There was nowhere to go. I took a deep, shaky breath and decided to tell him the truth, the simple, embarrassing human truth. "I didn't lie to you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I lied to Sarah's date. The date was for her. I'm her friend. She was too terrified to go, and she begged me to stand in for her. I was supposed to be as weird and obnoxious as possible so that he would leave her alone." A tiny flicker of emotion, something I couldn't quite decipher, crossed his face. "So you're saying that you intentionally tried to scare me off?" he asked, a hint of dark, surprising amusement in his voice. I nodded, my gaze fixed on his. That was the plan. It was supposed to be a favor, a quick, painless way for her to get out of it. He sat back on his heels, a long, heavy, contemplative silence settling over us. He was a puzzle I couldn't solve. One moment he was a terrifying, dominant predator. The next, he was tending to my sprained knee with a gentleness that made my breath catch in my throat. "I believe you," he said finally, his words so soft I almost didn't hear them. "It makes sense. The scent. It's close to hers, but not the same. It's what made me hesitate on the initial contact online. I could tell something was off. Now I know what it was." My blood ran cold. He had known all along. Known that the woman he was talking to online was not the one he was supposed to be looking for. And he had gone on the date anyway. The realization was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. He had seen through my clumsy lie, and instead of leaving, he had pursued me. "What is a mate?" I asked, my voice trembling. "And why were they looking for Sarah?" He took a deep breath, and the powerful scent of dry earth and something wild and untamed filled the air. "A mate is a soul bond," he said, his voice low and solemn. "A true-blood wolf only has one. Our world is weakening. The bonds are becoming rarer, and we are struggling to survive. When a male wolf senses his mate, it's a primal, unquestionable pull. It is everything. Our entire existence revolves around it." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "And they thought Sarah was yours." "No," he said, and his amber eyes locked with mine, a new, intense light in their depths. "They thought she was theirs, the rival clan, the one I just drove off." My breath hitched. "And you?" He reached out, his hand wrapping around my ankle, his touch sending a warm, tingling sensation up my leg. He didn't answer my question directly. He just looked at me, his gaze holding me completely captive. "I didn't feel the pull to Sarah's scent," he finally said, his voice a low, gravelly confession. "I've been searching for years, but when I met you, when I was with you—" He shook his head, a mixture of disbelief and something else I couldn't quite name on his face. "You smell like destiny." His words hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded with a meaning I couldn't possibly grasp. "You smell like destiny." The phrase wasn't a compliment or a confession. It was a simple, profound, terrifying statement of fact. My heart, which had been racing, now felt like a bird trapped inside a cage, stunned and disoriented. He was still kneeling, his large hand resting on my ankle, a warm, reassuring anchor in a world that had just been violently turned upside down. I don't understand," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with confusion. He rose slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "It's not a logical thing, Mia. It's a fundamental, primal thing. A scent. A unique genetic signature. Something an alpha recognizes instinctively." He moved to a low-slung, dark wood bar and pulled out a decanter of amber liquid and 2 glasses. "Scotch. I think you could use a drink." I nodded, my mind still reeling. He poured a measure of the liquid into 1 glass and handed it to me. The glass was cool against my skin, the liquid a deep, rich color. The scent was a heady mix of oak and smoke. I took a small sip, the burning sensation in my throat a welcome shock that brought me back to a sliver of reality. "The mate bond is absolute," he said, taking a sip from his own glass. "When a wolf finds his mate, it's a bond for life. It's a physical, emotional, and spiritual completion. It's part of our core biology. It's what gives an alpha his true power, his family, and his legacy. My scouts have been searching for years, hunting for a scent that would just feel right." He paused, a flicker of raw vulnerability in his guarded eyes. "When my enforcers went looking for the girl from the dating app, they were following a scent. It wasn't my mate's scent. It was close, a faint shadow of the true one, but it was off. Something was missing. They thought they had found an echo of a mate's scent, but they were wrong. It was her friend." He gestured with his chin towards me. "It was you." My blood ran cold. A wave of chilling understanding washed over me. The hunters from the alley had smelled Sarah on me, the confusing scent of the other woman, and they had been momentarily misled, still believing she was their target. The rival clan. The one he had said was also looking for a mate. He had saved me from being captured by them, not because he was protecting Sarah, but because they had mistakenly identified me as an echo of a scent they had been searching for. "I've run this city for 12 years, he continued, his voice softer now, more personal. "I've been presented with 100 different women, and not one of them, not a single one ever smelled like you, like destiny." He finished his drink, the empty glass in his hand a stark symbol of his finality on the subject. "And now they know you exist. They've seen you. They know you are not Sarah, but they know you're tied to me. They won't stop. Not now, not ever." He moved to the window, his large frame silhouetted against the glittering city lights. I felt a surge of panic. This was too much. The blind date, the lies, the hunters, the scent, the whole impossible truth. It was all spiraling out of control. I needed to get out of here. Back to my own life. A normal life. "I need to go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I stood up, but my injured knee gave way and I stumbled. He was there in an instant, his hands on my arms, steadying me. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure energy that made every nerve ending in my body stand at attention. The scent of desert earth was overwhelming, a dizzying mix of danger and strange, magnetic comfort. "You can't go," he said, his voice low and utterly firm. "Not tonight, maybe not ever. They'll find you, Mia. They'll follow your scent. They know your friend. They'll use her to get to you. You are not safe." His words hit me like a physical blow. The thought of Sarah being in danger because of my stupid favor, because of my clumsy lies, made my stomach clench with guilt and fear. "I can't stay here," I said, a new kind of panic rising in my chest. You're my boss. This is insane." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'm not just your boss, Mia, and you are not just a temp. You are something my world has been searching for generations, and now that I've found you, I'm not going to let you go." He released my arms and stepped back, giving me a moment to breathe. He led me to a bedroom, a spacious, minimalist sanctuary with a king-sized bed and windows overlooking the entire sound. "You will stay here tonight. You'll be safe here, and tomorrow we will talk. We will talk about everything. But for now, you rest. I will be just down the hall." He left the room, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone in the luxurious, silent space. I was trapped, not in a physical sense, but in a way that felt far more permanent. I was in my boss's penthouse, a man who was an alpha, a man who believed I was his mate, a man whose rival clan wanted to use me to destroy him. My life, my simple, ordinary, boring life was over, and a new, terrifying, and strangely thrilling chapter had just begun. I had just been trying to do a favor for a friend, and I had somehow stumbled into a world of wolves, lies, and a powerful, dangerous man who believed I was his destiny. The blind date had been a complete disaster, but the consequence was something far more terrifying and exhilarating than I could have ever imagined. I was no longer an observer in this story. I was a part of it, and there was no turning back. I woke up to a silence so profound it was almost total. For a moment, I was profoundly disoriented, the unfamiliar luxury of the sheets and the sheer scale of the room jarring me from my sleep. I sat up, my mind slowly, painfully piecing together the events of the previous night. The blind date, the frantic run through the docks, the hunters, and my boss, Elias Vance, revealing a world I never knew existed. My knee was no longer a throbbing mess. The dull, incapacitating ache had been replaced by a faint, tingling warmth. He had healed me. My stomach clenched with a mix of awe and terror. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. The city, which had been a glittering tapestry of lights last night, was now a bustling landscape of concrete and glass. The view was breathtaking, but it only served to emphasize how far I was from my own simple reality. I was in the penthouse of an alpha, a powerful werewolf, and my CEO. The irony was almost comical if it weren't so terrifying. A soft, controlled knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Mia, may I come in?" Elias' voice was low and steady, a powerful, calming presence I had already begun to associate with a terrifying sense of safety. "Yes," I called out, my voice a little shaky. The door opened, and he stepped inside, a mug of steaming coffee in one hand. He was dressed in a simple dark t-shirt and loose athletic pants, a far more relaxed look than the severe, expensive suits I was used to seeing him in. The change in clothes did nothing to diminish his powerful presence. If anything, it made it more palpable, more real. The scent of him, dry desert earth and rain, filled the air, and a strange sense of belonging settled over me, a feeling that felt both wrong and utterly right. "How's your knee?" he asked, his gaze fixed on my leg. "It's better," I admitted, flexing my toes. "Did you?" He nodded once. "My healing is not as potent as a true Omega's, but I can accelerate the process. It's a temporary fix. You'll still need to rest it." He placed the coffee on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress shifting slightly under his formidable weight. The casual intimacy of the moment was almost too much to handle. This was my boss, the man I had intentionally tried to scare away from my best friend. Now here he was, treating me with a concern that felt too personal, too deep. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firmer now. He nodded, a serious expression on his face. "I know. Let me get you something to eat first. Then we'll go somewhere private. There's someone I want you to meet." We went to the kitchen, where a substantial spread of food was laid out on a large marble island. I ate in silence, my mind racing. What was happening? How did I get here? It felt like a dream, a nightmare I was still trying to wake up from. He led me to a private study, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and dominated by a large mahogany desk. A man was sitting in a leather armchair facing the window. He was older, with a kind face and a calm, centered demeanor that seemed to be a direct contrast to Elia's raw intensity. "Mia, this is Rylan, my beta and the clan's historian," Elias said, gesturing to the man. "Rylan, this is Mia Hayes, the woman I told you about." Rylan turned, and his eyes, a warm hazel color, met mine. He gave me a gentle, accepting smile. "It's an honor to meet you, Mia. We have been searching for a long time." His words confirmed my worst fears. They weren't just searching for a mate for Elias. They were searching for something else, something bigger, something vital. "You're not just a mate," Rylan said, his voice soft and soothing. "You're a life weaver, a rare gift, an Omega with the power to knit not just bones and flesh, but the very spirit of a wolf. It is a gift that our clan has lost for generations, and with it we've lost our equilibrium. We've become—" he hesitated, glancing at Elias. "We've become too focused on the fight. The old ways were about strength, yes, but also about healing and balance. We need a life weaver to remind us of that." Elias' amber eyes were fixed on me, a new kind of emotion in their depths. Hope. This wasn't just about a bond or a legacy. It was about the survival of his clan, his family, his people. And he was looking at me like I held the absolute key to their future. "The hunters who were chasing you belong to a rival clan," Elias said, his voice low and dangerous. "They are led by a man named Victor. He is ruthless and desperate. He has been searching for a mate for years, and he believes he has the right to take a mate from my territory. The moment he smelled you, even that faint, confusing echo he got from your friend, he thought you were his. A prize to be taken, a tool to be used against me." I swallowed hard, the weight of their words settling in my stomach like a stone. "And you think I'm yours?" He didn't hesitate. "I know it." Rylan nodded. "The mate bond is not just about a scent, Mia. It's about a fundamental alignment. Elias has never felt it, not with anyone but with you. It's as though he has found a piece of his own soul he didn't know was missing. My mind reeled. I was a coffee shop waitress. I was a temp. I was a girl who lived in a tiny apartment and worried about rent. I was not a mate, a life weaver, or the key to a dying race of supernaturals. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice raw with emotion. Elias knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. His touch was warm and firm, a silent iron promise. "Nothing. I want nothing from you except for you to be safe. You can't go back to your life, Mia, not now. Victor will find you. He will use you to get to me. You're no longer just a temp. You're a part of my clan, a part of my life. You're my mate." His words weren't a plea, they were a statement. He wasn't asking for my permission. He was simply stating the new reality. The blind date had not been a disaster. It had been destiny. And I was standing on the precipice of a choice that would change everything. The rival clan, my boss, his destiny, and my life. It was all tangled up in a web of lies and ancient prophecy, and I had a terrible feeling that there was no way out. Elias' words weren't a plea. They were a statement of fact, carved in stone. My life as I knew it was over. I was a part of his world now, a key piece in a larger, deadlier game I never wanted to play. I looked from Elias' intense, fiercely hopeful amber eyes to Ryland's gentle, knowing hazel ones. They weren't asking me to sacrifice my life. They were simply telling me I had no choice, that the path had already been chosen for me by fate. The terror I felt was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but for the first time, a new, strange emotion joined it. A profound sense of belonging. The scent of dry, desert earth and rain that radiated from Elias felt like a profound, primal pull, an anchor in the storm of my emotions. "I can't go back," I said, the words a raw, fragile confession. "I know." Elias' hand tightened on mine, a silent, potent promise. "No, you can't, but we're here. We will protect you. My clan will protect you." I swallowed hard, the weight of the last few hours settling heavily on my shoulders. I was a barista, not a warrior. I was a temp, not a life weaver. But I was here in this penthouse with a powerful alpha who believed I was his destiny. And for some insane, illogical reason, a part of me believed him too. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You stay here," he said, his voice firm and steady. "You are safe here. We will work to ensure you stay safe, and you will begin to understand. You are not a pawn. You are an essential part of who we are, of who I am." The sound of a distant, blaring security alarm suddenly cut through the quiet of the penthouse. Elias' head snapped up, his eyes immediately going to the panoramic window, his body tensed, the relaxed posture he had assumed earlier gone, replaced by the coiled readiness of a dominant predator. "What's that?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "A perimeter breach," Ryland said, his voice grim. "They're here." Elias' gaze locked on mine, a dark, primal rage simmering in the amber depths. "Victor, he won't wait. He knows you're here, Mia. He's coming for you." He turned to Rylan. "Get the rest of the clan in place. Lock down the building. I'll go meet him." "Elias, no," I cried out, grabbing his arm. "You can't go alone." He looked at me, a flicker of fierce determination in his eyes. "I'm the alpha, Mia. This is my fight." He started to walk away, but a wave of dizzying energy washed over me, a strange electric current that pulsed from my fingertips to my toes. It was an instinctive, protective feeling, a fierce need to keep him from harm. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed his arm, and a light, a soft, ethereal golden glow pulsed from my hands. It was the healing light, the life force I hadn't known I possessed. Elias stopped, his eyes widening in pure shock. He looked at my hands, at the faint golden pulse that was spreading from my touch, and then back at me. "You're healing." "It's not just a gift," Ryland said, his voice filled with awe. It's a shield, a protector, a true bond. Elias looked at me, a new kind of fierce resolve hardening his eyes. You're coming with me. What? I exclaimed, my mind racing. I can't fight. I don't know how to fight. You don't have to, he said, his voice low and intense. You just have to be with me. We took a service elevator down to the massive underground parking garage, where the rest of Elias' clan was gathered, their faces grim, their bodies coiled and ready. They were a mix of men and women, their eyes all holding the same fierce loyalty to their alpha. When they saw me, there was a flash of surprise, but no animosity, just a tense curiosity. This is Mia, Elias announced, his voice a low, absolute command. She's my mate, and she is a life weaver. She will be with me. A ripple of murmured assent went through the group. They accepted his word without question. Their alpha had found his mate, and that was all that mattered. The battle was brutal and swift. The rival clan, a group of 5 hulking, vicious werewolves, had breached the parking garage through a service tunnel. Their leader, Victor, was a massive, brutish man with eyes full of a dark, possessive hunger. He was terrifying, his body a coiled mass of muscle and raw menace. Elias, Victor snarled, his voice a low, feral growl that echoed off the concrete. You have what is mine. Give her to me. She is not yours, Victor, Elias said, his voice a dangerous, low rumble. She never was. She is mine. And then the fight began. Elias fought with a power and ferocity that was breathtaking, a blur of motion and raw strength. He was a force of nature, a true alpha. But Victor was equally powerful, driven by a desperate, possessive rage. I watched, my heart in my throat, as they clashed, a whirlwind of muscle and fury. I wanted to help, but I had no idea how. Then I saw it. Victor landed a blow, a crushing, brutal hit to Elias' ribs that sent him staggering back, a low groan escaping his lips. A dark, black stain immediately began to spread across his white t-shirt. He was seriously hurt, and something inside me clicked. This was an emergency. The kind of emergency only a life weaver could face. I rushed forward, my hands extended. Elias, let me help you. He looked at me, his eyes clouded with agonizing pain. Mia, stay back, it's too dangerous. But I didn't listen. I put my hands on his side, and a wave of pure, white-hot energy erupted from my fingertips, a pulse of life and warmth that flowed directly into his wound. I wasn't just healing his physical injury. I was pouring my strength, my essence, my life force into him. His eyes widened, a look of pure shock on his face as he felt the immediate surge of power. The wound closed, the dark stain fading. Victor watched, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. What is this? You're not just a life weaver. You're an omega with a soul bond. You're a true mate. The realization seemed to drain the fight from him. He couldn't win against that. Not against the combined, amplified power of an alpha and his true mate. Elias, his strength renewed and his body whole, looked at me, a silent, profound question in his eyes. I gave him a small, determined nod. He turned to Victor, his voice a cold, final command. Get out, he said, his voice laced with the full, devastating force of his alpha authority. And never return. Victor and his pack turned and fled, their massive forms disappearing into the darkness of the service tunnel. Elias' clan cheered, a loud, triumphant roar that echoed through the empty garage. I stood there, my hands trembling, my body exhausted, but filled with a new, exhilarating sense of purpose. I had done it. I had helped. Elias walked over to me, his hands reaching out to gently cup my face. He looked at me, his amber eyes filled with a new kind of awe and possession. You saved me, he whispered. You're everything, more powerful than I could have imagined. I leaned into his touch, my exhaustion finally catching up with me. I was no longer afraid. I was home. The blind date had been a complete disaster. A stupid lie that had landed me in the middle of a war between werewolves. But it had also led me to him, to a world I never knew existed, and to a destiny I never could have imagined. I had been searching for my place in the world, and it turns out I had found it. Right here, in the arms of a man who was not just my boss, not just an alpha, but my true mate. And so, Mia's blind date wasn't a disaster. It was her destiny. She found herself at the heart of a hidden world, where a simple favor for a friend led her to the alpha of a powerful clan, and a truth that changed everything. The man she was meant to run from became the one she could no longer live without. Her old life is gone, but a new, exhilarating journey has just begun, with a mate by her side who will protect her from every enemy, human or otherwise. This is just the beginning of Mia and Elias' story. The world of werewolves is filled with secrets, power struggles, and unexpected bonds. If you loved their journey, you'll want to see what happens next. Subscribe now to my channel, where we'll dive deeper into the world of Blind Date with the Alpha. Don't miss out on the next chapter of this incredible story.